Welcome back to our second and last part of our UI UX Design with Figma series this semester. As a reminder of where we're at, last week we went through just getting it in onboarded into Figma, learning some basic shapes, doing all those things. We left off with that discussion of like the components and stuff, and we'll definitely cover that since it's super important. And then today we're going to be mostly focusing on kind of finishing up that stuff from last week and then kind of turning into an animation and prototyping focus where I'll show you how to actually add some motion into your design to actually simulate when you click a button, it takes you to that screen and stuff like that. Okay. We have a lot to go through today. We might not get through it all, but we'll just go through as much as we can. We'll start off by looking at the Figma community. This is where we're going to get the starting file that I prepped for us. And then we'll also explore using a design kit. The one that we're going to use is made by Apple. Apple kind of published their different things. So we'll look at the iOS one so that it's like we're making an actual iPhone app. We'll learn one last design technique that I think is really cool, and that's masking. It's basically just using a shape to kind of tell like an image or something behind it where it should be constrained to. We'll then jump into what we were covering last week with the components and the instances and the variants with our reusable design stuff. We'll do our animation and prototyping, and then I'll show you once kind of everything's done, like how you would share this with other people so that they could click through something for you. Okay, so our starting file, you can type this URL that's on the screen, this bit.ly/s26 Figma file into your browser. It's also on the whiteboard. And when you do that, you should see a screen that looks like this. And this is a Figma community file that I made and published for us to start. And if you scroll down, you can see a little bit of a preview of what it includes. And in order to use it, you just click Open in Figma. When you open it in Figma, you should see something that looks like this, right? So just a little bit of an overview of this file that I've prepared for us. So we have three sections. We have an assets and components section where we're just kind of putting all of our design stuff together. I made an animation playground one. This is where we're going to start exploring animation between two different frames and seeing the different settings and what they do. And then I have a section for our mobile app screens that we're going to design and start kind of making here. We've got some images and stuff up here. I see all of my text styles, color styles, my effect styles, layout. That's pretty much it. And I've named everything. So they should be pretty descriptive of kind of what they are as well. So the first thing I want us to do is to get that iOS design kit that's back in the community file. So if you still have your kind of community thing open in a different tab, you can use that. Otherwise, there is also how do we get there the best way from here? You might have to go back to your files like this, and then under community right here, you can go there as well. So once you're in the community, if you just search up iOS design kit, and let's see where they have it. There we go. So it's going to be by Apple. It looks like this. So iOS and iPad OS 26 UI kit. It's just named iOS and iPad OS 26. And if you click this, they have a bunch of like kind of like this image and then this preview. They have a bunch of different pages and stuff. So if we just click open in Figma and we'll just make a copy of this file. And then now in here, we get all of the stuff that Apple's published as part of this UI kit. They have a ton of pages here. So they have examples, they have colors, materials, they have all of this stuff. And so if you go to examples, might take a little bit to load. You can see that this is going to show some like example screens of stuff that you can use in your design as well. If you want to use an example color picker or these other things. This home screen widget looks pretty cool, so we might be looking at that. There's lock screen stuff. And the one I want you to find is on the examples page. There's the iPhone section, and there's going to be this home screen one, and it has this My App on it. This is where we're going to kind of make our own app icon, place it on here so that when we're prototyping, we can kind of click on it and then it actually opens up our app. So if you just click on this home screen component and I'm just going to Command C. You can also right click and click copy. Then back in my design, I'm going to Command V. Might take a little bit to load, but then you can place it on where it says iOS Home. Now this is fully editable. So if the one thing that's a little bit funky is that there's so many nested layers. So you might have to click in a couple of times and do things. So it takes a while to get there. I had to like double click in like 3 or 4 times. So just kind of know that as you're working with these things that other people publish, they might have theirs organized in a different way. So I'm gonna go to where it says My App. I'm gonna go way in. And I can just double click in here. It's going to say, hey, if you want to use this font, you have to agree to their terms. Basically, the biggest thing is that you are using this for iOS apps. You can just say agree. We're just learning this, using this for education purposes. It's fine. So I'm going to double click in where it says My App, and then I'm just going to name it whatever you want your app to be named. In this one, I named it like this is our coffee shop app. So I'm going to just call it like that. Now you'll notice when I pressed enter in between the two, it does this little dot dot dot, but you still have that text over here as well. You can name it whatever you want. This doesn't matter. Now I'm going to double click on where I see this one to indicate that there's notifications. I'm just going to delete it. I don't want that as part of my design. You can keep it if you'd like. And then now you'll see that there's this icon here, and we want to use this for our logo. So I'm going to go up to my logo in my assets and components that I've designed. I'm going to hold down Option on my keyboard and click and drag to make it a duplicate. You can also just Command C, Command V if you want to just copy paste it. Now I'm going to just drag it over onto my screen here, and I'm going to place it kind of where I would like it to be, and then kind of resize it. I'm just kind of making it closer to this app icon. And I want to place it within there. You might have to kind of figure out where it is. They didn't do a great job naming theirs. It's just app icon, app icon, app icon, app icon. I opened up mine before. You should also be able to find it maybe by the text that you used. So if you just click on it, you should be able to find it. And then just move your duplicate one to inside of that icon group. And it might be a little funky. Oh, it is not enjoying that. Okay, we're gonna just play around with this. So we're just gonna place it on top and then go to the app icon. There'll be this custom icon default and its fill is an image. I'm just gonna change that fill. So I'm gonna add a new one and then use my eyedropper tool to pick my logo background. And then I am going to increase the corner radius so it looks a little bit more like the other apps. So basically what I did was I just went and found that app icon underneath. So when I click on app icon, it's highlighted here. Underneath the icon section, there's this custom icon default. That's going to be your background. So I selected that. I clicked add on the fill, and then I just changed the color. So I used the eyedropper tool and I selected the background of my logo that I put on top of it. And it'll probably create a kind of sharp box around. And then just to change the corner radius, you can just do that over here in appearance. It doesn't look the greatest. So the next thing that I want to show you is a concept called masking. So if you have used something like Photoshop before or Illustrator, these different design tools, you might know about masking. Basically, what that allows you to do is to control how much of a certain design element, like an image, is actually showing. So in this case here, I have my image. And maybe I don't want to crop it. Maybe I want it to just be in this size, but be able to kind of move it around and try to make sure that it's exactly where I want things to be. So for that, you'd use something like a mask. So to make your mask, you have to place your image on top of the shape. So I've already made our shape and I've already had our image, and they're just right here. They're named full screen background, image, and shape. Or click on the image and move it to be somewhere on top of my shape. And you can resize it to make sure that it's the same height and it's fully covering it. Once your image is on top of your shape, over here in your layers panel, with your image still selected, hold down Shift and click on the shape. And so in your layers panel, you should have both full screen background image and full screen background shape highlighted. Now, if you right click in here, or you can also click on the Figma icon and then go to object, either one works. You'll see this use as a mask option. And when I do that, I get what's called a mask group, and that still has my image and my shape. But now my image is confined to only show within this shape's boundaries. So if I click on the image, I can still move it around and position it within my shape where I like it. I can still resize it and do all these things. I could even still customize my shape. And that's a really nice way to like be able to do something like this, where you don't have to worry about doing some fancy cutting of the image and stuff like that. Now we're gonna get practice with this again because it can be a little confusing sometimes. There is a little bit of requirements as well. So the first one that I mentioned is that your image has to be on top of your shape. If I were to put my shape on top of this image, for example, and try to do that same thing and use as mask, you'll notice I just skip my shape. So it's not super helpful. So always make sure that your image is on top of your shape. The other thing is that your shape has to have a fill color. So right now I have this just any fill color, doesn't matter. If I make it just like an empty box and I do this same thing and I do use as mask, it just all disappears. So you have to make sure that your image is in front of your shape and that your shape has a color. Where this can get really cool is if you were to do something like a gradient. So we didn't cover gradients yet, so this will be just a very quick crash course. When you're looking at your fill, by default, you're going to get this solid color. If you go to the next tab, this is going to be your gradients. And I just clicked on this fill box right here. You have some different options for your gradients. Linear is just in one line, changing between your colors. Radial is going to be a like a circle going out from the center outward. Angular is a really kind of like funky circle, but it's a line and it's a little weird. I've never used it. And then diamond is the same thing as radial, but instead of a circle shape, it's a diamond. So I'm just going to stick with linear. And what you can do with something like a mask here is you can kind of toggle how much of an image is showing with the color's opacity. So right now we have two colors, this more white color and this gray color, and then they both have 100%, which means that they're fully colored in. So when we're using it as a mask, that'll mean that the entire image is showing at all points because these are both at 100%. But let's say I were to switch this one to 0, right? So I just clicked where it said 100 and I'm doing 0. And so now I get this gradient that goes from this fully colored gray at the bottom to fully transparent at the top. You're not seeing anything. Now, if I were to use this mask or this shape with my mask and I do it, and I'll zoom in so we can see it a little bit better, and I do use as mask, I now get this cool effect where the image is fully showing where I had that gray color at 100% opacity, and then it slowly blends out into where I had that white color that was at 0%, which is fully transparent. So I'm gonna undo that. We're just gonna use the typical fully opaque one. And so position the shape underneath your image, make sure that your image is full sized. You select both your image and your shape, and then you can right click or go to Figma, Object, and click Use as Mask, and it cuts your image with that shape. And you can still move the image to get the framing that you want. You can customize the shape. And this can be with any shape, by the way. So far, we've just been doing kind of like basic rectangles, but you could do like a very custom blob shape. So maybe I wanted to go like this and then some corner radius. If you double click into any shape, you'll notice that you get these kind of striped lines. And that means that you're editing the shape itself. And so now I can use these anchor points to kind of create some weird shape if I want to. And if I were to use this shape as a mask, my image would only be showing like in this, if that makes sense. I can show it just so it makes more sense. So if I were to place this shape underneath my image, do both, right click, use as mask. Now my image only shows within that custom shape that I created. So you can create some kind of cool shape effects. So let's return to our discussion of components that we started last week. So we're going to do this with this navigation menu that I created. So in my assets and components section, I have this navigation menu, and we're going to create this as a component. And the reason why we want to do this is we're probably going to have this navigation menu on every single screen of our app. And so this is a prime kind of candidate for making something reusable where you don't have to remake the same thing over and over again. And components allow you to set it up where you can change something once and it applies everywhere on your app. Don't worry, we're going to play around with it so that it makes more sense. So if you have something that you want to create into that component, you have it selected. So I'm going to select where it says navigation menu and it selects my whole thing. This is all within its own frame. And then up here in the kind of top right settings, you should see this diamond that has 4 diamonds within it by where it says frame. And this is the thing to make it as a component. So if I click this, you'll notice that we got a little bit of options different here, and it went to purple instead of blue. That's the only change that's happened so far. So as a reminder to do that, you click on whatever you want to make a component, and then you find this 4 diamonds within a diamond icon, and you just click it. With this now as a component, it's super easy to place it on all of our screens. So if you ever forget the shortcut to move around, just hold down spacebar and click and drag. So I want to have this menu on my home, my locations, my menu, and my cart screens. So I don't have to do that like option click and drag. I don't have to copy paste. If I go to where it says assets and my left, we now see something in here that we didn't last week. And you'll see that there's this option for created in this file. And if I click into that, you'll see all of the things that you've made a component. So I did it twice. You probably only have this navigation menu, and you can just click and drag and move it to where you want it to be. So let's do that for all of our app screens, at least the 4 that are on my screen right now. So home, locations, menu, and cart. So with these here, these are now what are called instances. So the component that we made is up here. This is the thing that we selected. We hit that diamond icon. This is our main component. When you click and drag it, it creates different what are called instances. That is just basically, it's the same thing. But now when you click on this, you'll notice that you get different options from the other one. So this says that it's from this file. And when you click on this button right here, it will jump you to its main component. Now it's really nice. And I'm going to move this so that we can see these both on this screen at the same time. So I have my main component up here, and then I have all of my instances down here. If I were to make any changes to my component, like let's say I'm making this for a client and they really hate the green for whatever reason. They're like, change the green to something else. We can do that. So with the main component selected, under selection colors in the design tab, you'll see where it says dark green. This is just going to click and select all of the dark green that's in this element. So if I were to switch this to, let's say, the light green, it updates across all of my instances down here as well. So it's super helpful whenever you're making something that's going to be reused several times across your project to make it a component and then just put instances elsewhere, because then you only have to update it in one place and you don't have to keep going back to all of these other things. Now, there's a little bit of a note on this. So I did my update on my main component here, and it applies to all of the instances because those are all linked back to this main one. However, if I were to go to one of the instances here, and let's say I change that dark green color to the brown, this essentially cancels that link. It ends the link between this instance and that main component. And so if I were to go back to my main component and change the dark green to light green, it's not going to update this instance. Because basically I'm saying I'm updating the instance. I want to override this so that it only is like its own thing, but it's still related in a way, but it's not going to receive any updates that you make at the main component. So I'm just going to undo that a couple of times. And now the last thing with these components that I want us to do, if we go back up to our header image, and if you haven't already, make that as a mask. So remember that's the shape is behind, you select the shape in the image, and then you right click or go Figma object and then click use as mask. So where it says mask group, I'm just going to rename that to be header image. And then I'm going to make this a component itself. So I'm going to click create component. Now, with components, you can add different variants of these. So how you do that is with your main component selected, there's now this diamond with a plus icon up in the top right. And if you click that, you'll notice that it'll duplicate and it makes this into this little um, like group selector. And we'll have our default and our variant too, but we'll rename these to make them a little bit more indicative. And then while we're at it, let's just add another variant. So once you've added one, it should show this plus icon at the bottom when you click on the name. So you can just add a third one. Now what I want to do is place these images in here, okay? So this one is my image 2. So I'm just going to move this on top of in my layers panel. I just found header image, image 2. I'm finding variant 2, and I'm just placing it right underneath. And then I'm going to move it in front of the other image. And you can delete the other one from this mask group if you want. So I'm just placing it, just doing whatever I need to do to it. And I'll do the same for the other one. So header image, image 3. Click and drag and move it right underneath variant 3 and release. Then I'll move it into place. And now I should have 3 different header image variations here. Now, why is this helpful? So if I want to have different images here, now I can go to assets. I'm in created this file or created in this file, and I can see my header image. And if I hover over it, I see a 3 in the top right. And that's because I have some different variants in here. So I can click and drag and put it on maybe the home screen. I'll click and drag and put it on the locations. I'll put it on the menu. You can place it wherever you want it, just like the other component that we played around with. But now, because we've created some variants, up here in the top right, when we have it selected, we'll see property 1, and then we get this drop down where by default it's going to be the one that we created originally. But now if we switch from default to, let's say, variant 2, we're going to just see that image that's our variant 2 variant, which is this one. If we click this one and we switch from default to variant 3, it'll show that variant here, and when you update, it updates across here as well. Now, if I want to name these a little bit better, if I select my main component, under in the top right, you'll see properties, and you can click where it says property one, and then you can just name this whatever you want it to be. So this might be the thing that's different between these variants is the image. So I'm just going to call it image. And then now to change what displays in that dropdown, I have to click each individual variant. So if I click this first one, if I click where it says default, I can then just give it a different name. So in this case, this might be like it has like a bunch of plants, so I'll just call it plants. Then if I click the second variant, it still says variant 2, but I can click in there and name it something else. Maybe I'll name this light bulbs because it has these light bulbs up here. And then down here, I'll click where it says variant 3, and maybe this is my like lobby area. So I might just call it lobby. And then now when I'm playing around with these down here, these instances of these variants, it now has this property of image, and then I can select with a better name. So now let's move on to the main focus of today, which is going to be our animation and our prototyping. So there's really two types of prototyping and animation in Figma. The first one is going to be motion between frames. So what that means is if we have our iOS home, if we click on our app, it should go to maybe the app loading screen, and then it will move to our account access screen. And then once we log in, it goes to home. So this is just motion in between these different frames that we've created, these different screens. The other option for animation and prototyping is going to be changing between these variants. So this could be something where maybe we have a variant of the home icon on our navigation menu where this would be more for like a website, not a mobile app. But maybe if we like hover over something, it changes color. So we could set that up where the icon is a component with different variants depending on its state, like a hover or you're clicking on it or something like that, where it changes color. So we are going to start off by learning animation with our animation playground screens. So this is in our animation playground section, and we have an animation start and an animation end frame. So let's first do something super simple. So we're going to add a circle. So the down arrow by the rectangle will give you your options. You can also just click O on your keyboard, and that'll jump you right there. So on our animation start frame, which I'll zoom into, just click and drag and hold down Shift if you want a perfect circle, and just create a circle. And let's change the color to are dark green. So as a reminder, if you have a style that you've created, you use this for circle menu, and then you find the style and you click that. And this is in the fill section of our circle. Now let's duplicate our circle and place it on the animation end frame. So I'm going to hold down Option and click and drag and place it somewhere else on the screen. So not in the exact same position. And then let's also change the size. So I'm going to make mine smaller. So I'm going to hold down Shift and then click and drag to make it smaller, but still keep it a perfect circle. And then change the color. So right now we have dark green. I'm just going to switch to our light green option. So under fill, I click dark green and click light green. Yours doesn't have to be exactly like mine, but have something, the same circle, but have different properties. So different position, a different size, and some different color. So we've done most of our work in this design tab up here. Now we're going to switch to prototype. So we're going to click on prototype, and it's going to show you some prototype settings. So this is going to be when you're actually kind of like showcasing the design, how you want it to look. It's going to give you a device. By default, it's iPhone 17 because we've been using a similar frame. If you click on it, you can switch to a different one if you'd rather it show differently. And you can do no device, you can do a custom size, you can do all these different things. But we can just keep it like this. If you really want to get fun, you could change the color of the iPhone. Right now it's lavender, but if you wanted it to be a mist blue iPhone instead, You can do that. You can change the orientation as well. And then the color here is going to be the background of our prototype. So what happens when we're on the prototype tab is we're going to get some different tools and some different options. So if I click on my frame and I'm in prototype, you'll notice that as I hover over the sides, I get these plus icons that are like halfway between them. This is basically how you can start creating what's called a connection. So this is how we connect from where we want our animation or a movement to start to where we want it to go. And so you can also do that with individual elements. So like this circle that we created. So if you click on the circle and you hover over the right side or the top or the bottom or the left even, doesn't matter. You should see this plus icon. And I'll zoom in a little bit so it might be a little bit bigger. Now, if I want, let's say, to simulate clicking on this circle will move us to this other frame, you just click and drag and move and you'll get this arrow. And you can just point it towards animation end as our frame. And you'll notice that that frame lights up in blue and you can just release. And then now you should get this little pop-up called interaction. So the interaction has a couple of different properties here. The first one is going to be your trigger. So this is going to be what is the action, what is the thing that actually starts this? So when we click and drag and move it, it's going to give us on tap by default. But if we click on there, we got a couple of different options. So we also have on drag, which would be if you wanted to drag something and then something happens. While hovering is going to be if you're hovering over this element, something's going to happen. That would be like how we do something like I mentioned before of like hovering over an element changes its color. That's how you would simulate that. While pressing is if you're like actively pressing down on this thing, like clicking and holding. Key and gamepad is if you want to put something on a keyboard or if you want to hook up like a PlayStation controller and like click something on it to move it. If you're gonna be maybe design a game or something, you can simulate that. There's also mouse enter and mouse leave, which is very similar to hover, just you have a little bit more control on entering and leaving. You can simulate different things. And then touchdown and touch up is also very similar to while pressing, just you have more control on these different things. There's also none. So none is basically like, I want this interaction to happen instantly when it's loaded. And then after delay is the same thing, but you can specify how long you want something to kind of just sit and wait before something happens. This is kind of helpful, which we'll use in a little bit when you want to simulate maybe that something's loading, for example. So maybe when we click on the app icon in our iOS home, we get to our app loading screen. Most apps don't load instantly. So you might want to simulate like a very short delay to kind of be like, things are loading and it looks a little bit more real, which we'll go through. Action is going to be what you actually want to happen. So navigate to is just going to be move to this other thing. Change to is going to be if you want to change between variants. So if we wanted to, let's say with our other images that we set up as variants, like click on it and then change to a different image. That's how you would do this. Back goes back to where you were. Scroll to would be you can set somewhere else in the design to scroll to. So maybe you click on something in a table of contents and it'll scroll you to that like heading or something. Open link is if you wanted to create like a button that opens up a web page or something. There's these variables and conditionals, which is a little bit more advanced than we're going to cover, but this basically allows you to have designs that kind of adapt to different conditions. And when something is true, something happens, where if it's false, something else happens, which you can set up. We're not going to cover that today. And then we also have these overlays. So right now we just have all of our screens being like a full size screen, but maybe you want something like a pop-up window to happen. That's your overlay here. So if you click on like, let's say login, and then maybe like a login form pops up and you can then swap between them. You can close it if you hit the X button. That's different things here. But we're just going to keep navigate to for now. Destination, by default, it's going to give us that frame that we pointed it to. So animation end. but let's say you placed it on the wrong thing, or if you want to add an interaction, just like click on the frame and then click on interactions plus in the prototype tab. You can specify more directly, but clicking and dragging kind of gives you some stuff to start with. So if you want to change the frame that it goes to, that's just your destination. And then animation is going to be your speed controls. So this one says instant, so that's just going to instantly take you to this next thing. There's also going to be these different animation options that we'll go through in a little bit. Under state, there's also this reset scroll position. So basically, this is determining if you want to, if you like go to a frame and then you come back, do you want the user to be where they were scrolled at? If you like, if they were scrolled way down, they click something, they go to a different screen, they click back. Do you want them to be where they were at before, or do you want them to be at the top of the design again? And it was just a bunch of random things. So let's actually see this in action. How we're going to do that actually, though, is through presenting it. So when we start our interaction, it creates what's called a flow. And these you can set up to be your flow is like your whole app interaction from clicking on the iOS home screen to it loading, to you logging in, to you looking through the menu, to you adding stuff in the cart. It can be your whole app, or you can create like individual flows for those different workflows you might be doing. So you might have a separate one for adding something to your cart and checking out versus a contact one. And this is basically kind of up to you to decide how you want to separate these. The main kind of guideline is if you're going to do any sort of like user testing where you bring people in for them to play around with and give feedback on the design and all of that, you'd want to probably hone in on like what you want them to test so that you don't have to say click here, click here, click here, click here until you get to the part that you actually want them to test, where instead you have a different flow for everything that you can separate and hone in on what you're looking for. There's really two options to see your design. So the first one is going to be this present button, which is this play in the top right. If I click on that, it's going to open up a new um, kind of tab and show this full screen. It shows that those iPhone settings that we had and this background and what to do here. And this is really helpful if you're going to be like actually doing like a big presentation to a bunch of people. But if you're still in like the design and you just kind of want to simulate how it looks, by your flow name. So this is just flow one. You can always rename it something a little bit more helpful. There's this present or this preview option. You can also find that underneath this down arrow by present. And this essentially is just going to give us this little movable iPhone that we can kind of change things in our design and see them in real time. Okay. So to get to that, you just have to have that interaction, that flow, and then you click on this button right here by your flow name. So now in my iPhone preview, we've set up an interaction where if we click on this circle, it's going to take us to this other frame. So if I click on it, it takes me to my animation end frame. Just click on your circle. You can click and drag to move to the other, and then now the animation start. And then now when we preview, we can click between the two. So this is important because to have this set up because we're going to explore some different of those animation properties to show how things change between these. So right now we just have a big dark red green circle. We click, it instantly jumps us to our frame with our small light green circle. So if you want to edit anything about your animation, your interaction, when you've already created it, you can just click on the that connector arrow, or if you need to like click and drag over it to make sure that you get it, you'll get that interaction thing again. You can also find it if you click on the starting element, and then in the prototype tab, there's interactions right here. So animation is set to instant, but let's say we were to change it to dissolve. So dissolve is going to start to kind of add some more kind of flavor to our animation. So basically what's going to happen with dissolve is when we click on the button, and it's really quick right now, it just kind of slowly fades away. Right now it's at 300 milliseconds, so duration is going to be how long this dissolve animation takes. And I can increase this. So by default, any number that you put in here is going to be in milliseconds. But if you want to put in like a specific second value, you can do the number and then the lowercase s. So if I do 3s, it'll automatically convert to 3000 milliseconds. And then now when I click on it, it'll take a full 3 seconds to kind of dissolve from the first frame to the next frame. So just goes really slow over 3 seconds. Now the curve is a basically how fast your animation is going through the whole duration. So if we were to click on where it says ease out and click linear, basically what linear means is that you're going to have a constant speed to your animation from start to finish. So all of the things that are changing in this dissolve is going to just incrementally change between the start and then the end, which is right now it's 3 seconds. So if I click on this, it's just going to be a constant change. Then we have these different options of easing. So easing is going to be on this kind of group of what are called Bezier curves, which this is basically just like, do you want to add a little bit more flavor to this animation so it's not just constant speed the whole time? The easing in is that it's a little bit confusing at times. It's basically the start of your animation. So an ease in means that it's going to start slower and then build up speed. So if I do ease in and I preview, it's going to be really slow at the beginning and then kind of build up into a faster animation. So ease in is really slow and then gets faster, 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 faster. Ease out is the exact opposite. So it's going to start off faster and then kind of get really slow towards the end. Ease in and out is exactly what you think it is. It's just the two of them combined. It's slow at the beginning, it gets faster in the middle, and then it gets slow again at the end. Then we have these kind of weird ones of ease in back, ease out back, and stuff. They just get a little funky, a little complicated. Um, the best way to kind of show them, which I will show you right now, is let's say we go back to linear. And then from linear, with that selected, we're going to click on custom Bezier. And this is going to actually give us a little speed graph to show the animation. So your animation speed is going to be based on this slope. And because it's a straight line, a straight slope, that just means constant speed. But if we were to switch, let's say, to ease in and do that again, you'll see that it's slower at the beginning because it's a little bit more flat, and then it gets to be a little bit steeper, which means that it's going to be faster. And then you can do the same thing with like ease in and out. Click over here, and you can kind of see it's flatter, gets steeper, gets flatter again. So when it's flatter, it's slower. When it's steeper, it is faster. Now, if we were to look at something like ease in back and then do custom Bezier, it gets real funky. So basically, when we do that and we do there, you'll notice that it's like this little weird, it does like kind of nothing and then it goes into it. Um, I don't typically use these, but they're there if you want. Additionally, when you have the custom Bezier selected, because if I go back to linear and do this, this is an editable graph right here. So if I were to click and move this top one, I can make my own kind of speed graph and figure out exactly like what kind of speed that I want here. So if I were to do something like that, I get what my speed was with this. Might take some practice. Typically, you're just going to be using probably one of the easing functions. This is kind of like the base animation here. Usually it's going to be an ease out is the most common. These ones are what are called spring presets. And spring presets are a little funky. They're a little different. Basically, these spring presets give your animations a little bit of physics to it. It's a little bit more technical. So if I were to click custom spring, you'll notice I get different options and a different graph. So we get stiffness. This is going to be how like physically kind of like stiff and immovable your object is. So the lower the number, the stiffer it is. Your damping is going to be your friction applied to a motion. So if you were to put like damping to zero, that means that there's zero friction to your motion. It's going to never slow down. And then the more that you add, it's going to start to slow down your animation. And then mass is essentially the like weight of the object, like how hard is it to move. So the greater the mass that you have, the greater that the force you need to move it. So if I were to just do this one by default and I were to click on it, it's a little funky to kind of figure out what's truly happening here. The stiffness is at 100, but let's say I were to increase it to 500. You'll notice that that moved that up here, and it looks a little stiff, and I think I did a little bit of a break because you can see it kind of flash. It's a little funky. So I'll bring that back down. Damping is basically, let's say I want 1, so this is going to be this kind of weird bouncing back and forth. And because it's at 1, which means very low damping, it's going to be going on for almost forever. If I were to put it at 0, for example, oh, it doesn't let you do that anymore. They're like, you have to have something. So this will just keep going on for a long, long time. The descriptions for the presets, and let me stop this because that's a little annoying. The descriptions of the presets for the curve are pretty descriptive. So gentle is going to be a gentle animation. Quick is going to be very quick. Bouncy, it's going to bounce a little bit at the end, and then slow is slow. So let's go ahead and spend the rest of today just building out our mobile app screen so that we actually have something to kind of show off and play. And before we're done, I'll show you the strategies to actually share this design with other people so that they can click through it and stuff like that. So I'm going to go to my iOS home. So on the prototype tab, I'm going to find my logo here, and I'm just going to click and drag over to my app loading screen because I want us to, when we click on this, it's going to start loading our app. So trigger is going to be on tap because we want to click on the thing and then something to happen. We're going to navigate to the screen, app loading, and then we have our animation. And I completely forgot to talk about these other ones. We can go through those right now before we get too deep in this. Okay, going back here to our animation playground. So we've only done dissolve, which is basically just like a little bit of a one screen dissolves into the next. There's also these different moving and pushing and sliding options. So move in, if you click on that, you're going to see a little bit of an animation for what's going to happen. And if I preview this, so we're at move in. So basically it's a little bit different. The other one jumped us to, but when we click move in, that second frame is going to move in on top of this frame that it started. And with these settings, there's animate matching layers. So this is basically, do you want, if you have like the same layer between these frames, do you want them to be animated or not? An example of this is like if you are clicking from screen to screen that has like the same header image and the same menu, do you want those items to be animated as part of this or not? So an example, just so I can show you, is if we go to locations and let's say we move over, and we'll just say on tap, navigate, move to. If I click animate matching layers, you can basically determine whether or not you want something to be moving over. So when I don't have that turned on, right? I don't have animate matching layers. It's just gonna take your screen and move to the next one, right? It's just gonna move on top of it. If you have animate matching layers on, it's going to look at the layers that you have on your screens. So in this case, it's going to look at the image, it's going to look at our menus and be like, what's the same and what's different? If something's the same, it's not going to animate it moving over. It's just going to animate the things that are different over. Now, the reason that the image is animating is that if we look at our locations and our menu, even though header image is the same, our image names are different, right? So it's actually looking more specifically at the way that you've named your layers. So right now it thinks that these are two separate items. And maybe we want, and they are, but if you had like the same image and you name them the same, it won't be animated over, which is what we see with our navigation menu. Because our navigation menu, it's called the same between our two different frames. All the buttons are named the same, the background's named the same. So because of that, when we click animate matching layers, because of that, this won't be animated. Your direction is what direction you want the next frame to move. So by default, it's going to come from the right. So right here is just saying, hey, move from the right to the left on top. You can also change the direction if you want it to move that way, if you want it to move from the top down, if you want it to move from the bottom up. This would be like if bottom up would be something if you wanted to simulate like a keyboard, for example. Like if you click on a text field and you want like the iOS keyboard to pop up so that you can type, this would be a good use of that. And then we get our same kind of animation curve and duration settings. So we can do linear, we can do the duration. I think maybe my spring preset was the cause of that. Move out is basically the same thing, but the difference is that instead of the second frame moving on top of your first frame moves away to reveal the second frame underneath it. So if I were to change it to move out, and I preview, you'll notice that my first frame just moves out instead of the second one moving on top. Push is basically kind of a combination of the two. Basically, the second frame comes in to push the other frame out. So if I were to do push and reload this, so this is set to push, one moves out as the other moves in. But I think because these are such big images, they take a little bit to load. And then slide in and slide out are very similar to the move in and move out. It just layers on a bit of that dissolve onto it. So with the move in and move out, it's just like pure, it moves things to and fro. But the slide in and slide out will add a little bit of that dissolve, a little bit of that kind of blurring into nothing animation. The last one here, which is the coolest one in my opinion, is in our interaction for animation, we have Smart Animate. So Smart Animate is kind of doing the same thing that that other animation setting, animate matching layers is doing. And it's going to look at the layers that you have on your starting frame and your ending frame. And if they have the same name, they're going to create kind of their own animation between the two different things. So if I were to click Smart Animate, and I'm going to change the curve to like ease out over, let's say, 3 seconds, what it's going to do, and this is because I have ellipse 1 on my starting frame and ellipse 1 on my ending frame. They're named the same thing. If they're named differently, this won't work. So with them named the same thing, I have Smart Animate turned on over 3 seconds. If I click it, it's going to move my circle. It's going to change its size and it's going to change its color. And if I were to turn that on for the other one as well, so that's just animation, Smart Animate, and then I'll also do 3 seconds. Because these are named the same thing, Figma will look at their properties and then create a smooth animation between the two. So I will show those settings again. So now let's go back to our screens. So I have I'm going to tap and I am going to move to my loading screen. Now, for our animation, it's probably either instant or dissolve. Kind of depends on how big the app is, essentially. So if it's like a really small app and you click on it, it might just pop up instantly, or it might kind of dissolve on your screen very quickly. So if we were to put dissolve on and let's go to like ease out over 300 milliseconds, that should be probably pretty good. Also, instant would be a good option here as well. So if I were to preview this, I can click on my icon and we get to this frame. It doesn't look like much, but let's start adding some stuff onto it. So when our app is loading, we can kind of put what we want on this here. So I'm going to take my mask group that I did for my full screen background. I'm going to rename it full screen background just for clarity. I'm going to make it a component just to keep it separate. So this is going to be our kind of diamond shape in the top right. Now I can go to my assets tab and find where I have full screen background. I'll just click and drag and move it on top of our app loading. So just kind of resize it so that it's actually on the full screen. And then we'll go to our logo because maybe we want the logo to show up right away. So go to logo, I'll make that a component as well. It shows up in my assets tab, and I'll just click and drag and move it on and place it maybe somewhere in the center of the screen. And then now when we go to our prototype and we preview, it'll kind of slowly dissolve that on. It is a really big image, so it might just take a little bit to load. So now let's build our second one, our account access. So we have full screen background already. I can just click and drag and move that, and I'll resize it. I'll have my logo as well because it's a component. I can just click and drag and move it. And then as an example, made the login button a component. If you haven't done that, just go up here to your assets and components, click on it, and then in design, you can click on that diamond within diamond, make it a component. And then now I'm just going to add this button to my screen, and I'm going to reset this. Now, if I want to prototype between my loading screen and my like account access, my login screen, you can do the same thing like you were doing before. So you just, instead of clicking on like the actual logo and animating from that to here, you can just do it with the frame as well. So just hover over the frame on the right side. There'll be your plus icon, and you can move over here. Now, right now, the trigger is set to on tap. When an app is loading, do we have to tap on it to actually make it load? No. So you have a couple of different options. So one of them that you could do is none. So if you wanted it to just like instantly go from your loading screen to the next one, you can do none. That would simulate a very fast loading app, which doesn't always happen. Normally there's a little bit of a delay. So we can do the after delay option. Now, this one already kind of worked for me here with our Smart Animate, and I would recommend doing this because we have the same background, we have the same logo, but we're adding a new element. So without even having to kind of do some kind of custom things, if I were to go back to my preview and I click on my app, it loads, and then it'll smartly animate the stuff to match the next frame. So that's what's happening here. So it's after a delay. Your delay is going to be how long do you want this delay to actually last? And then you have your animation properties like we've gone through before. Now let's keep it moving. So if we have our login button, let's say we click login, and we want it to then take us to our home screen. And this one we will do, let's say dissolve, kind of make it a little bit of a not so instant, not so sharp. It's kind of more smooth. And then now we get to our kind of fun reason that we set this up as a component, right? So when we first started talking about animation today, I mentioned that there's two different types of animation and prototyping in Figma. One of those is in between frames, and that's pretty much all we've been doing so far, right? So we're just going here to here, here to here, here to here. And the other one is animating between variants, which we can do. But the reason that we want to set up something like this that's reused all across here as a component is we can prototype from here, from our main component, and it's going to apply to all of our linked instances, right? So if I were to click inside of my navigation menu until I get to my home, and this has to be up here. It can't be the ones that are down here. So if I were to find my home in my assets and components section, and I were to click and drag to move to my home frame from here, it'll be on tap, navigate to, dissolve, whatever you want to do. And I were to click outside, you'll notice that when I click in my section now, or I click out, yeah, it looks like you have to click in your section. You'll see all of these different connections from this instance to the home frame, from this instance to the home frame. And that's because I prototyped that home button from the main component. And then those settings, that customization, that configuration is getting pulled to my instances down here. And so I can go to location, add it here, can go to the coffee icon. That's maybe our menu, and then go to my cart, add it here, and just as simple as that. Now every screen that I have my menu is already prototyped to move between the screens that I want. So one last kind of prototype thing, as I mentioned, the animation can change between variants as well. So maybe for some reason, this is just a funny example. This wouldn't be an actual use case for this one. Um, Maybe when you hover over this image, you want it to switch to a different one. So if I were to click on my image right here, and I can go under prototype and interactions and click plus. Maybe I can change trigger from on tap to while hovering. And action, so far we've mainly done navigate to, but if we click change to, which has been unlocked because this is part of that component group with those different variants. Before, if there's no variant, this change to is going to be grayed out. You can't use it. So if I were to click there, now I get my that image property, and I could say, well, I wanted to change to the light bulbs picture. So what that's going to look like now is, let's say I were to preview here. So right now I'm here. Now when I hover, it changes to my other picture. And the reason it does that is because we set those up as different variants. And then in here, my interaction says while hovering, the action is changed to, and then we selected that other variant. Now, because it's a while hovering, it only happens when we're actually hovering over it. So this is super helpful. Typically, where you would use that is probably with a website design instead of a mobile app. It's a little silly in this case because you can't hover over an element, it can't detect that. But on a website, you would maybe use that to, hover over a button and then maybe the button changes colors to show that you can click on it. So now if we go back to the start of our kind of mobile app screens and we preview this, we can now kind of simulate this whole app experience between these things. And it doesn't look like much because we haven't added a lot of content, but now we basically can do those simple things. And then as you add like buttons to do other things or text, it just looks better. You're kind of simulating this whole app experience. Awesome. So last thing to share is basically how do you share this with other people, right? You've made this whole thing. How do you actually share it with a user to have them test through things? How do you share it with, a friend if they want to play around with your app or your website or whatever you're creating? So there is going to be this share option up in your top, right? And under share, you can click on copy prototype link. And that's going to give you this link where now if I were to, let's say, paste that into a different screen, I now get my simulated app and I can click. So as I mentioned last week, there is like a free version of Figma. So someone can just sign up for a free account and then be able to view your prototype. But then they would get the same thing like we've been kind of playing around with over here, and they can kind of click through everything. And when you're clicking on somewhere that doesn't actually have an interaction, you'll notice that the things that do will highlight. So if I'm clicking like right here, there's nothing I can do here, but the buttons at the bottom are highlighting in blue to show, hey, that's where you click. If you've made something and you want to kind of do like I did, where you share it to the community and other people can like remix your file, do different things, or even just to show off, you can just click share and then update community file. There would also be published to the community because this is already on the community stuff. But you also do have a couple different options that I'll go through right now. So there's Git embed code. So this is basically if you want to make a portfolio website and you want to include this workable prototype on your actual portfolio website, this Git embed code is what you would put into your site, and then you can have like someone visits your portfolio, they go to this section and they'll be able to click through without having to kind of do any of the copy the link, place it in a browser or anything like that. And the last things, just kind of like as a note, things that we won't go through, is that Figma also does have this what's called a dev mode. So that's down here in our toolbar. And when we click on dev mode, they're giving us this pop-up. They have this new kind of feature that they're really pushing, but we can get out of that. This is basically where if you want to take your design to something that is actually kind of developed, maybe you hire a developer that's going to actually go through your app and like actually create all the screens. You can, once you're in like design mode, for example, if you click on, let's say, the app loading screen, this is exactly how you want it to be developed. You can click on this kind of mark as ready for dev button, this thing. It makes it green, and that just kind of signals to any kind of developer or maybe even also just to yourself of like, hey, this is exactly how it should be developed. Once you get to dev mode, it'll have this little section of, hey, this is ready for development. You can start working on this. And as you click on different elements, you will see information about the different element. You'll see these different layer properties. So in this case, it's going to show you kind of your margins, if there's a border, padding, the actual content size. It actually also gives you some code to start off with. So in this case, it's telling me just height and width. Right now it's CSS, which is the coding language styling for the web. But if I were to click on there, I do have some other options for iOS using Swift UI or UIKit, or Android if you want to use Compose or XML. There's some different settings for your units. There's also some plugins if you want to, instead of having to just kind of manually copy all these things. There's some plugins that people have made that will kind of transform your whole design into code, kind of helps you most of the way. You can have your assets, and this person can also download from here as well, so they don't have to go and ask you for the image. It's already in here, and you can see information about your colors and all of this stuff. Thank you for coming and learning about Figma.